What's the best TV for HDR? In this video, we're going to look at 17 HDR TVs to see how they compare in the real world when watching HDR. Let's take a look at real world brightness, or sustainable average scene brightness. What this means: when you're watching HDR content, the brightness varies from scene to scene. So I've averaged what you can expect to see from TV to TV. We're going to avoid looking at peak brightness as a considerable HDR metric because it's mostly used for benchmarks and marketing hype. You will rarely see that level of brightness when gaming or watching real-world movies. After looking at every HDR metric I could find, I have averaged the sustainable HDR peaks and drop-offs and rounded to the nearest tenth to keep this simple. And here it is. All 17 TVs. The average person can notice a change in brightness of about 100 nits. So starting with the Samsung MU6300, it comes in at 350 nits HDR real scene brightness. Next you have the Samsung MU7000 coming in at an average real scene brightness of 360 nits. Then we come to the Sony X850E with an average HDR real scene brightness of 400 nits. The Vizio M series comes in at roughly 410 nits average HDR real scene brightness. Next we have the Samsung MU8000 coming in at 420 nits. Next up you have Samsung Q7F at 440 nits. Then we have Vizio's P series scoring roughly 450 nits average HDR real scene brightness. Just for fun, I dropped in Samsung's KS8000 from 2016 to see how it stacks up to the 2017 models. It came in at 460 nits. Next up is the new kid on the block, TCL's P607, scoring 490 nits. Just up ahead, we have the infamous Sony X900E at 540 nits. The Sony A1E OLED came in at 600 nits average HDR scene brightness. The Samsung Q9F came in at 700 nits average HDR brightness. LG's B7 and C7 came in at 720 nits average HDR brightness. Again, just for fun, I dropped in Sony's 2016 X930D, which came in at 890 nits. The 2017 Sony X940E came in at 1190 nits. The flagship Sony Z9D came in at 1380 nits average HDR real scene brightness. At number 1, we have the Sony X930E with an HDR real scene average of 1450 nits. From left to right, you can see the percentage increase from TV to TV. Here are the prices of each TV in the 65-inch model, with the exception of the TCL, because that TV does not come in a 65-inch. Now looking at HDR and HDR only, no other factors such as contrast, motion, etc., I've gone ahead and highlighted in green and red which TVs are the best value for your dollar if HDR is the primary factor in your buying decision. Here are the groups of TVs that share a similar average HDR real scene brightness. If you're looking at two TVs within the same group, if HDR is your primary requirement, you may not notice much difference between the two TVs. Here's an example of what an upgrade path might look like for someone who currently owns or is considering a Sony X850E. If someone considering an 850E were to bump up to the Sony X900E, they would have to pay almost $500 just to get 151 additional nits. If you're a Sony X900E owner, or you're considering the 900E and you want to go up one more level, you might consider the LG B7 or C7, and that would give you an additional 172 nits, but that's going to cost you an additional $1,000. Alright, this one's going to be a little bit tricky because we're not considering contrast, but if you were looking at nits alone and you wanted to upgrade your B7 or C7 OLED, you might want to jump up to the Sony X940E. that would give you an additional 466 nits. But that's going to cost you an additional $1,500. And you're going to lose your perfect viewing angles and your perfect blacks. But hey, we're only talking about HDR average scene brightness today. And jumping up to the 940E gets you a heck of a lot of luminosity. Now, if you have the 940E, you really only have two options. You're either looking at the Sony Z9D or the Sony X930E. They're pretty close and almost indistinguishable, but if you want the absolute maximum brightness and luminosity, the 930E is what you want. And at $3,000, it's $1,500 cheaper than the Z9D. Huh, I wonder if this is why Sony keeps the 930E so far away from the Z9D in retail stores. Come to think of it, I haven't seen them side by side too often. Okay, that's it for now. In the next video, we're going to be talking about how inky black contrast impacts your HDR performance. Alright guys, leave a comment below, let's talk about it. Oh, and if you didn't know, we're just a bunch of gearheads around here. If you want to join the family, hit that subscribe button. Jump into the comments, because it's a lively conversation around here. Let me tell ya.